black and poor. During my first weeks at the University of Chicago in the fall of 1989, I had to attend a variety of orientation sessions. In each one, after the particulars of the session had been dispensed with, we were warned not to walk outside the areas that were actively patrolled by the university's police force. We were handed detailed maps that outlined where the small enclave of Hyde Park began and ended. This was the safe area. Even the lovely parks across the border were off limits, we were told, unless you were traveling with a large group or attending a formal event. It turned out that the Ivory Tower was also an ivory fortress. I lived on the southwestern edge of Hyde Park, where the university housed a lot of its graduate students. I had a studio apartment in a 10-story building just off Cottage Grove Avenue, a historic boundary between Hyde Park and Woodlawn, a poor black neighborhood. The contrast would be familiar to anyone who has spent time around an urban university in the United States. On one side of the divide lay a beautifully manicured Gothic campus with privileged students, most of them white, walking to class and playing sports. On the other side were down-and-out African Americans offering cheap labor and services, changing oil, washing windows, selling drugs, or panhandling on street corners. I didn't have many friends, so in my spare time I started taking long walks, getting to know the city. For a budding sociologist, the streets of Chicago were a feast. I was intrigued by the different ethnic neighborhoods, the palpable sense of culture and tradition. I liked that there was one part of the city, Rogers Park, where Indians, Pakistanis, and Bangladeshis congregated. Unlike the lily-white suburbs of Southern California where I'd grown up, the son of immigrants from South Asia, here Indians seemed to have a place in the ethnic landscape along with everyone else. I was particularly interested in the poor black neighborhoods surrounding the university. These were neighborhoods where nearly half the population didn't work, where crime and gang activity were said to be entrenched, where the welfare rolls were swollen. In the late 1980s, these isolated parts of the inner cities gripped the nation's attention. I went for many walks there and started playing basketball in the parks, but I didn't see any crime, and I didn't feel particularly threatened. I wondered why the university kept warning students to keep out. As it happened, I attracted a good bit of curiosity from the locals. Perhaps it was because these parks didn't attract many non-black visitors, or perhaps it was because in those days I dressed like a deadhead. I got asked a lot of questions about India, most of which I couldn't answer, since I'd moved to the States as a child. Sometimes I'd come upon a picnic, and people would offer me some of their soul food. They were puzzled when I turned them down on the grounds that I was a vegetarian. But as alien as I was to these folks, they were just as alien to me. As part of my heavy course load at the U of C, I began attending seminars where professors parsed the classic sociological questions. How do an individual's preferences develop? Can we predict human behavior? What are the long-term consequences, for instance, of education on future generations? The standard mode of answering these questions was to conduct widespread surveys and then use complex mathematical methods to analyze the survey data. This would produce statistical snapshots, meant to predict why a given person might, say, fail to land a job, or end up in prison, or have a child out of wedlock. It was thought that the key to formulating good policy was first to formulate a good scientific study. I liked the questions these researchers were asking, but compared with the vibrant life that I saw on the streets of Chicago, the discussion in these seminars seemed cold and distant, abstract and lifeless. I found it particularly curious that most of these researchers didn't seem interested in meeting the people they wrote about. It wasn't necessarily out of any animosity, nearly all of them were well-intentioned, but because the act of actually talking to research subjects was seen as messy, unscientific, and a potential source of bias. Mine was not a new problem. Indeed, the field of sociology had long been divided into two camps, those who use quantitative and statistical techniques and those who study life by direct observation, often living among a group of people. This second group, usually called ethnographers, use their first-hand approach to answer a particular sort of question. How do people survive in marginal communities, for instance? Or what makes a government policy work well for some families and not for others? The quantitative sociologists, meanwhile, often criticize the ethnographer's approach. They argued that it isn't nearly scientific enough and that the answers may be relevant only to the particular group under observation. In other words,